Oh, wow, that was close. I thought I wasn't gonna make it. I was going through security on the other side, and when they asked if I had any liquids in my bag, I told them the bottle of Romulan ale I bought for Shane was proto-molecule. Yeah, not doing that again. Those droids have no sense of humor. Hey, did you know that the transporter system runs on Kubernetes? So do all the shuttles and most of the systems here on this space station. Kubernetes is all around us. It's the system that people build for. It's the place where applications run. It even drives the conduits that move applications from developers to users thousands of times a day. How did this happen? How did something go from being an interesting idea to a global force in such a short span of time? And what does that mean for the future? Ah, my Padawan. In order to answer that, we must go back in time to 2014 to a place called Rancher. It's funny when I say things like back in 2014 as if they were a lifetime ago, but they really were a lifetime ago. Everything changes so quickly. Whatever we're doing today isn't what we need to be doing tomorrow. And someone else is already thinking about what tomorrow's killer product is going to be. So back in 2014, a lifetime ago, Docker was growing in popularity. People were figuring out how to use containers to do things that they couldn't do. Well, that they could do, but that were harder to do. The easiest thing that containers overcame was the problem of a developer shipping code that worked on their machine, but that didn't work on the target machine. Or maybe it worked, but the environment was different. So containers solved that. But all that did was create a new problem. How do we get these containers into a usable system? How do we connect them across different hosts? How do we load balance traffic? This sounds familiar, right? Of course, today, it's Kubernetes. But before Kubernetes, there wasn't really any good solution for tying all this stuff together. There was Docker Swarm, and there was Mesos. Neither of them really hit the needs of the enterprise. So we built something that did. It was an orchestration system called Cattle with a management UI that we named Rancher. Rancher can manage different environments, build multiple node clusters, orchestrate load balancing, do health checking and workload scheduling, and it could even deploy Swarm, Mesos, or Kubernetes. Cattle was hugely successful, but by 2017, we could see that Kubernetes was going to win. So we decided to take all of what we learned about container orchestration in multi-cluster environments and move that over to this new common substrate of Kubernetes. We recognized quickly that Kubernetes was going to be like electricity. It was just going to be there when you turned on the light switch. It's what we do with Kubernetes. That's where the fun is. Imagine you live on a desert planet with your aunt and uncle, and you dream of being a space pilot. We've heard of this story, right? Your uncle has you checking on moisture evaporators in the field. One day during lunch, you're standing at the bottom of a huge sand dune, and you want to be at the top. It's a big dune. There's no path, nothing to hold on to, but that's not going to stop you. You want to be at the top of it. The thing is, the dune isn't what matters. What matters is that little paper X-wing that you're holding in your hand. You know that if you throw it from the top of the dune, it will go further than if you throw it from the bottom of the dune. Getting to the top of the dune isn't the objective. It's just something you have to do if you want the best chance of success. So you tighten your bootlaces, about ready to start running up this dune, when you notice that off to your left, someone has a lunar shuttle. There's a person there waving for you to come over. Take a seat inside of it. The thing is, you know that it'll take you to the top of the dune in seconds, where it would have taken you hours on your own, or maybe you wouldn't have made it at all. Because let's all admit, climbing a sand dune is hard work. You walk over, buckle yourself into a chair and you ask how much it costs. The pilot smiles, tells you, it's free. And then you're on your way to the top. Kubernetes is that dune. Rancher is the shuttle. All of us here at SUSE, we're the pilot. We want people to get to the top of the dune so they can throw their paper X-wing into the air and have the best possible chance at being successful. That motto exists in everything that we do. And a lot of what we do is tied into Kubernetes. For the Kubernetes part, it all comes back to Rancher. What is Rancher? Is it an orchestration system? Is it a monitoring system? Is it a GitOps solution? Is it a system for deploying and managing Kubernetes? Yes. It's all of that and more, but it's also simple. Rancher is a force multiplier. Rancher is an accelerant. Rancher gets you from I want a Kubernetes cluster to I have a Kubernetes cluster I can use. And it does it in the fastest and least complex way possible. Let's start with deploying a cluster. With Rancher, you can bring up a hosted Kubernetes cluster in a cloud provider like AWS, Azure, GKE, or half a dozen other ones. Or you can have a Rancher deployed cloud infrastructure, and then you install Kubernetes for you. Or you could provision infrastructure with another tool like Terraform, and then have Rancher just deploy Kubernetes. Or you can bring up nodes and install Kubernetes by any other means, and then import that cluster into Rancher. Rancher fits into your workflow. It doesn't tell you what to do. It does what you need to do. And it'll do it for dozens upon dozens of Kubernetes clusters. Remember when I said that containers just move the problem? Well, this is no different. Now you have a dozen Kubernetes clusters scattered across multiple providers. How do you manage them? How do you handle security? Let's fix that. Rancher plugs into a backend identity provider like Active Directory or systems that speak SAML, OAuth, or LDAP. Once connected, it brings down users and groups and makes them available for you to assign to the cluster it's managing. Now your teams connect through Rancher, and the combination of Rancher and your identity provider controls access to the clusters. You don't need credentials for every person and every provider. You only need their work account. When someone joins the organization, add them to a team, and they get access to that team's cluster. When someone leaves the organization, disable their account, and they instantly lose access to everything. No worry, no fuss, no breaches that happen because someone forgot to disable the IAM account. What's the next problem? How about using Kubernetes? Kubernetes runs off of YAML, and writing lots of YAML takes time. Let's fix that. Users deploy workloads through Rancher using a form that reduces human error and makes it possible for people with the bare minimum of Kubernetes knowledge to leverage its most powerful functions. Deployments, services, ingresses, persistent storage, routing and failover. We surface the most common Kubernetes functions and then make everything available to power users by exposing the underlying YAML through the UI. Rancher doesn't hide anything. It doesn't limit anyone. It doesn't tell you what to do. It empowers you to do whatever you want to do with as much knowledge as you have. For a business, using software that is open and interoperable and that adapts to the capabilities of your staff is important. The learning curve for Kubernetes is steep. It's a massive stand-do, but there's no time to waste in getting to the top. How do you get people using Kubernetes without having to wait for them to learn how to use Kubernetes in a way that doesn't introduce risk or latency? Rancher. Let's go faster. We include the very best open source tooling in the product for users to deploy. Bitnami's logging operator, Prometheus and Grafana for observability, Istio for service mesh, OPA Gatekeeper for policy enforcement. These are ready and waiting for you to deploy. Or you can use anything else instead. Kyverno, Linkerd, Elasticsearch, and Kibana. As little or as much as you want. Let's go even faster. It's not enough to deploy applications through a form. Not when you need to deploy a standard application like the tools I just described, or a database, or a Hadoop cluster. For that, you need to use Helm, the package manager for Kubernetes. All of Rancher's applications and the selected partner applications that come with the platform use Helm and can be managed from the command line or from within the UI. You can add any other Helm repository, and its charts and configuration become available for installation as well. But what's faster than Helm? What could enable Helm package management on up to 1 million clusters? For that, there's Rancher Fleet. Wait, 1 million clusters? Did I say 1 million clusters? 1 million clusters. Kubernetes is a substrate. It's electricity. It's going to be in every streetlight, every ATM, every electric vehicle, every airplane, thousands upon thousands of edge devices, satellites and space stations, and when your company needs to push an update to all of them, you don't want to be the one doing it one at a time. You take your code and configuration and put it in the Git repository and point Rancher at it. Then point Rancher at a group of downstream clusters, and it will deploy your code. It will keep it consistent. It will prevent any drift. It will push updates out when you commit them. It will work tirelessly to make sure that your clusters are consistent with your configuration. A lot of companies are focused on building the best sand dune for you to climb. We're focused on building the best shuttle. All of this so that your paper X-Wing has the greatest possible chance of success when you throw it into the air. So let's talk about what's coming in Rancher 2.6. First and foremost, after gathering input from both new and long-term users of Rancher, we've completely rebuilt the UI. A user interface is a combination of look and feel and usability. It's not enough to do a one-to-one map of Kubernetes commands to a UI. The user interface defines the user experience. In 2.6, the experience is one of speed and efficiency. It lets you do more things in a single pane than you could ever do before. And I'm extremely proud of the engineering team that created it. It's the UI that everyone should expect from a product like Rancher. You can also now import and adopt GKE and AKS clusters deployed by any other method. You could always import them, but now when you adopt them, Rancher takes over full lifecycle management for a cluster's nodes and performs upgrades as if Rancher originally deployed it. We delivered this for EKS and Rancher 2.5, and the customers loved it. We're excited to roll it out for GKE and AKS in 2.6. We're in a very unique position to protect our users, to give them the tools they can use to safely deploy Kubernetes and their workloads. One of those tools is the new Sousa Linux Enterprise Base Container Image. This is a container image built from Sousa Linux, pre-configured for access to a packaged repository of the most recent secure applications. People who build on top of BCI images can trust that the core components are secure and that Sousa will keep them up to date. It doesn't matter how secure the operating system is. If someone installs a container with a malicious code in it, they've let the proverbial fox into the henhouse. That's the problem that BCI solves. And in true dog food style, Rancher 2.6 will be the first customer of this new system, with product images built from Sleep BCI. What about security of Kubernetes clusters themselves? Rancher already has cluster scanning that measures clusters against the benchmarks provided by the Center for Internet Security. In 2.6, we are expanding Rancher's security capabilities to include end-to-end auditing of clusters to make sure they stay in full compliance. We've also added features to configure, deploy, upgrade, and manage our RKE2 clusters through GitOps. And we've expanded our cluster templates to include cluster configuration, node pools, applications, and user credentials. Rancher 2.6 now offers brand new provisioning based on the Kubernetes Standard Cluster API. That means you can now use the same set of API to provision clusters with RKE2 on any infrastructure from data center to cloud to edge. 2.6 is the first release to include networking solutions specifically for our telco customers. RKE2 and K3S clusters will support pods with multiple network interfaces through the multi-CNI, and will also support single root I/O virtualization, which enables a single PCIe device to appear as multiple devices inside of pods. Rancher 2.6 brings a world of value to Kubernetes, and we are excited for you to see it this summer. When you're in a world, it's easy to think that you're in the only world. Look at us. We're here in Kube world. And if this was all you looked at, you might think that there's only Kube world, that there's only Kubernetes, that there's only container technology. But there isn't. Here at SUSECON, there are also Linux world and Edge world. And in each of these places, there's literally a world of information you can use. Your business is no different. Sure, there's Kubernetes and containers, but that's only a piece of it. There are also all the things that make up the development and delivery of your applications. There's infrastructure. There are logs and events that need processing. There's monitoring. There's security. There's a complete pipeline of processes to get an application from the mind of your developers to the hands of your users. And every one of these points is a place where we ask, where can SUSE add value? Our business is built on open source. It's in our DNA. Everything we're building is designed to be open and interoperable. We want you to use the tool that's right for you. So even if you mix and match SUSE solutions with products from someone else, we're going to make sure that it works. We do that by grounding everything in the foundation of flexibility, freedom, and choice. Let's look at your infrastructure layer. You might be paying annual licenses to some company for their virtualization solution because it's all that's available without you having to solve all those problems yourself. Think about what you'd have to figure out. Storage, networking, virtualization, migrations, and interface for interacting with it all in a way that makes sense. It's a lot of work. Harvester solves all those problems. You see, Kubernetes already comes with all the glue to deploy, manage, migrate, health check, observe, scale, expose containers, and a container can be an entire virtual machine. But doing virtualization with Kubernetes is hard. We designed Harvester to do just what you need it to do. Deploy virtual infrastructure and wire it all together. It does this with Kubernetes, Longhorn, and other proven open source technology. And what it gives to you is a clean interface to quickly get the job done without even knowing that it's Kubernetes under the hood. And it's open source. How much do you pay in license costs for proprietary HCI solutions? How much more could you do if you could spend that on developing solutions for the problems you want to solve? Where else can SUSE add value? How many of you have ever been involved in a major IT incident? I imagine that more than a few of you have your hands raised or are nodding right now. All of us have. The curious thing about major IT incidents is that they're almost always a failure of multiple minor systems. It's a perfect storm of technology conspiring against us. And if any one of those minor system failures could have been prevented, the entire incident might not have happened. Technology produces noise, events, logs, metrics, audit trails. Everything is a system, and when a system functions normally, it has a baseline of operation that indicates normal. Every incident starts with a deviation from that baseline. You and I, we don't have the processing power to handle an influx of data in real time, but Opni does. Opni uses multiple machine learning models and learns in real time the baseline of your systems through the noise that they make. It requires no training and can be ready to use within minutes. Through a unique voting system between the models, it's able to detect when something deviates from the baseline. And when one does, Opni raises an alert. The next time we meet, if I ask you've been through a major IT incident, many of you will be smiling because Opni raised an early warning that let you make an easy correction before it turned into a costly, catastrophic failure. Opni is open source too, and will work with data from any system, not just Kubernetes. Where else can SUSE add value? Kubernetes manifests are written in YAML, and applications are made up of multiple manifests, each of which is made up of multiple directives for configuring each piece of the application. It's a lot to keep track of, and it's easy to make mistakes. Most breaches come from misconfigurations, and misconfigurations are almost never malicious. They're the result of poor training or just human error. People make mistakes, but intentional or not, a security breach will cost your business in ways you can't even calculate through lost customers, lost revenue, and a loss of trust. In hindsight, no amount of money spent on security would ever be too much, but that's only in hindsight. Today, you have to decide where to put that money to have it do the most good. And we want to make that decision easy for you by making KubeWarden open source. This tool watches as manifests are applied to the cluster and either admits them, denies them, or changes them according to a set of rules. Privileged containers? Nope. Running as root? Not gonna happen. Using an image with a known security vulnerability? Let's change that to use one that we know is secure. This in itself isn't new. There are mutating admission webhooks for Kubernetes already, but they either require that you learn a new configuration language or they operate as an interpreted solution and manifest visible in the cluster. They're clunky and they don't scale. KubeWarden uses WebAssembly to execute binary rule sets on manifests, making it easy to deploy and fast to operate. You can share rule sets between systems or between members of the community. You can test them offline with controlled inputs and outputs. Since they're compiled, they're standardized across every system where they run. That's less work for your staff and more security for your business. And of course, KubeWarden is also open source. So let's see. So far, we've got open source HCI, artificial intelligence for anomaly detection, and fast binary mutation of Kubernetes manifests to keep your cluster secure. What could we do next? How about helping your developers? One of the biggest drawbacks to Kubernetes is that it's difficult to run in a local development environment. There are all sorts of solutions for connecting to remote clusters, mocking dependencies, and tunneling traffic. But all of them depend on the developer understanding how Kubernetes works. Let's be honest, most developers don't care how Kubernetes works. The more you try to tell them they have to care, the less likely they'll use it. Developers want to ship code, and everything in their toolset should help them do that as quickly as possible. Kubernetes can't be a bottleneck in that process, so we're building Rancher Desktop. There's a lot planned for Rancher Desktop, and I don't want to spoil the surprise of the features that are coming. What I can tell you is that we're starting out by making Kubernetes a first-class citizen on the desktop. You'll be able to choose between different Kubernetes versions, so if you're developing an application, it'll be easy to test it in multiple environments without having to leave your local system. Which leads me to the final project I have time to talk about today, Epinio. Having Kubernetes on the desktop isn't enough. Kubernetes is electricity, remember? When you turn on a light switch, do you think about the properties of inductance and the flow of electrons? No. So why should a developer have to think about Kubernetes in order to push code? The same way that Harvester abstracts Kubernetes and delivers an HCI solution, Epinio abstracts Kubernetes and delivers a developer experience that goes from I have some code to my code is deployed with a single command. No Docker files, no Kubernetes manifest, just code and push, code and push. When developers are happy, they write more code. When they write more code, they release faster. When they have tools to make that process even faster, we end up in a reinforcing feedback loop. And that's the value Sousa brings to you across the board. It's open source, and it will work with you, no matter where you are or what distribution or operating system you choose. At Sousa, we have an ear to the ground and an eye on the future, so that you have the flexibility, freedom, and the power to choose. We're also members of this community, standing alongside all of you, and together, through the power of many, we all go farther than we ever could alone. I recently sat down with Zach Anderson from ABSA to talk about his experience with Kubernetes and how Rancher helps ABSA achieve its business objectives. He has some great insights to share with you. Take a look.
It's great to talk to you again, Zach. For the benefit of viewers, tell us about ABSA and your role there.
Yeah, thanks. Well, for the introduction. So my name is Zach Anderson. I'm running the container service for ABSA. We are on a very strong open source development journey on ourselves. So from a solution perspective, we adopted open source primarily as our main core focus. And we are in the financial industry. We do insurance, wealth. We are in about 12 countries. So it's primarily the Africa footprint. We do have footprint in UK, and we do have footprint in the US.
Cool. That's excellent. So let's just start with some questions. The most important thing is, tell us about the importance of open source technologies at ABSA.
Yeah, so I mean, from an ABSA perspective, we are a big driver of open source in our own community inside ABSA. We don't only do that in our own community, we do it externally as well. So we contribute largely to the community. We try and build everything open source. We try and veer very much away from vendor-backed bought solutions. If we can build it ourselves, we will actually build it and then implement it and then contribute it back into the community. We also have got a very key sandbox project which is getting a lot of airtime. It's called KEY1005. It's a load balancer we built for Kubernetes. It's actually getting quite a lot of viewers. I mean, the team that we have, which sits in Prague, they've actually built that. The other big one that we've contributed is in our big data environment, where the big data strips out a whole bunch of the white space, so condensing the sizes, and then basically that will then decrease the amount of storage we need to use, So, I mean, ABSA is a major contributor to open source, and open source is key to our heart. And I think that's why we get so well along with Rancher. Rancher's engineering team is awesome. So I think the synergy was there already from an ABSA perspective, and then it morphed into the Rancher perspective,
Yeah, I know. We talked about that open source collaboration between your team and my team too at Rancher. But then, now that we're at Sousa now, why don't you tell us how has Kubernetes and Sousa Rancher helped transform your business?
So the open source community we have inside the bank, obviously at the core being Rancher Labs, which we chose as a solution because it was as close to open source as possible that we could do. We've actually migrated a whole lot of our applications into a microservices environment. So what that did is it took our data center estate, which was massive, right? So we're talking about 2,000 square meters plus in one data center, and about 900 squares in the second data center, which was our DR data center, which we file active, right? What happened is with us moving this into the microservices backed by Rancher, and with the framework we had in place, we could move these apps into a microservices environment, thus decreasing the footprint size. From about 2,000 squares in the one data center, we're sitting at about 300 squares now. The other one has gone down to roughly about 500 squares. But bringing all of that from a physical server or physical VM into a microservices was the biggest driver for us. And that's what we got right. And we got it right because we chose the right core product, which was Rancher or Kubernetes. And that's what enabled us to do what we needed to do. And now we're going on our second journey. We're going onto AWS with Rancher, which is our next reiteration. So we're releasing a lot quicker. Our developers develop quicker. They understand things quicker, and it's all based on the good best practices that are built primarily into Rancher's platform, and then also the stuff that we plumb on top of that.
Man, that's awesome. So, but then it leads to my third question. You've already answered a little bit of it, but how has your use of Kubernetes grown over the last few years? I know when we started, it was a pretty small deployment, but I would imagine, by now it's gotten a lot bigger.
Yeah, so initially when we did talk, it was a very small deployment. We took one of our applications, core applications, our vehicle asset finance. We rewrote that and we launched it onto Rancher, and that was our first app. Within 2 to 3 months, we moved all our workloads, which was running on OpenShift. We basically moved majority of that onto Rancher, which brought our container count, and I'll say there was 3,000 containers at that point. We today are sitting at roughly just short of 800,000 containers, which is microserviced. So from a scale perspective, we've literally moved and migrated off an old container platform onto a new one within 5 months. and that's the core banking payments, our markets environment. We're doing our trading through that. Everything is now microserviced. We're also looking at other services, bringing on automation, our AI bots. Everything is now running on a microservice or Kubernetes platform. And again, it's backed by a Rancher. And it's because we've got a strong relationship with you that we can do what we do, you know?
That's awesome. So then with regards to that, then what's next? What's next for you and your team?
Yeah, so what's next for us is obviously we want to transform the bank even more. So we are adopting and training our people internally. Ranch has done quite a lot of extensive training into our environment to bring more microservices into it. So try and adopt more and more serverless technologies, bring in more microservices, get rid of old monolithic applications, which was backed by vendor priced solutions, you know, where we can bring major savings. We've seen major savings already, and we are trying to invest into the open source environments to bring that even more. So the biggest thing for us is the roadmap we've seen and where you're going. It's unlocking more and more features for us, allowing us to do much more. So we are working with you to have this, what we call family style engagement. You know, we are one big family. And the nice thing about it is it lets us carve our strategy based on what you're doing as well. And it actually transforms quite nicely into what we're doing as a cloud journey. And we are going to be doing cloud end to end. And we're pushing that by the end of this year. We'll actually migrate all our on-prem Rancher clusters. They'll be sitting in the cloud. And that's how quickly we're able to do it just based on Rancher, you know.
Man, that's so exciting to hear. Look, Zach, I know you have a very, very busy schedule. Thank you so much for joining me here and telling the audience about the exciting things you're doing at APSA. You know, when we get more time, and hopefully you'll be seeing the keynote at SUSECON as well, but there's a lot of exciting new open source projects we're about to launch as well, so love to hear your feedback about that. And, you know, for the rest of you guys, please, this is not, you know, I believe Zach's going to be having a session about himself to further dig into and explain more about APSA. Thanks, everyone.
Yeah, thank you. Thank you very much, Will. I'm very excited for the journey going forward.
Bye there.
Bye-bye.
There's a lot going on here at SUSECON, in Edge World, Linux World, and here in Kube World. Enjoy your stay. And when you return to your own world, download and use Rancher along with the products I introduced today. Harvester, Opni, KubeWarden, Rancher Desktop, and Epinio. We created these for you, and we need your participation for them to be their best. This is the future you're looking for.